So after kind of the disappointing loss in the 1919 Little World Series, Attleboro had invested a lot in winning, both money and emotionally, in winning the 1920 Little World Series. When they did, they went wild for the party at Nils Restaurant. I think the last time I presented, I was struggling to find a picture of this. This is in the Bronson building, which is currently empty. So if you want to create a 1920s themed restaurant, we got kind of a picture of what it could look like, where the Attleboro fans and players went and celebrated after winning the game at Brady Field. So this is how the Sun Chronicle described the scene. Nils Restaurant was jammed Saturday evening with a cheering, joyous mob headed by the Attleboro players, who were cheery and joyous likewise. The Attleboro faithful enjoyed a meal produced well up to the Nils standard, while Negro jazzers filled the room with celebratory music. So you can kind of picture Roger Hornsby, Grover Cleveland Alexander, Sam Reich, George Sisler, Rabbit Mirandale in there, having a great time. It's kind of an interesting, mental image to put together with the people of Attleboro. Also, and I think this is kind of a cool story. So there was a sturdy hospital nurses kind of fundraiser that they tried to tie into this. Had all the players sign a napkin. So among the players, future Hall of Famers, Roger Hornsby, Sam Rice, George Sisler, Moranville would have been on that, and then started kind of an impromptu auction that former Mayor Harold Sweet won for $135, which a ton of money back then. But we think about kind of the historic value of all those baseball players' signature on the same napkin tied to one event. I can only imagine where it ended up. It's floating around in some attic in Attleboro right now. If you have an elderly neighbor next to you, maybe knock. Do you happen to have this? It would be pretty good. Which I think is a cool little aside. One of the kind of the unfortunate things is there aren't a ton of pictures from the Attleboro Little World Series. I explained this to people. The picture of Babe Ruth shaking hands with Oscar Wolfenden that I showed earlier. I actually found someone had stumbled upon an original copy somewhere and put it on eBay a few years before I started doing research. When I kind of pulled it up, it was like archived or something that had come up. It had been referenced in the Sun Chronicle that a picture had been taken of Babe Ruth with Oscar Wolfenden, but it was never published there and was never published in the Providence Journal, which was kind of the other paper that gave the most coverage to the Little World Series over time. But there were a few pictures that were. So this was from the 1921 Little World Series. This game took place at Weston Field in Providence. You can kind of see the stands here, and it's kind of crazy. It looks like even for this inter-town game, most people with bowler hats on, dressed somewhat formally in the background, as Hank Gowdy, who is the Attleboro catcher, who was from the Boston Braves. He's actually the first Major League Baseball player to voluntarily enlist in the military during World War I. It was kind of seen as this big national hero for sacrificing multiple years of his career to serve in the military during the war, tagging out George Burns of Providence at the plate. So here's another picture. It's not all that great, but again, the crowd at Weston Field in Providence. I was hoping I could get back to the beginning. And then just because I didn't discuss this one too much, this is, I believe, from game 1 of the 1920 Little World Series at Brady Field. So again, it's tough to identify players because no teams put numbers on the back of their jerseys, and obviously the picture quality of something printed in 1920s, not the greatest, not going to zoom in too much. But you can again see people kind of in their Sunday finest to come out on a Saturday for a baseball game at Weston Field and the way it was prepared. Just the huge crowds. So going down the first baseline, I didn't have any pictures from this series of it, but it kind of came all the way down of stands where they had thousands of people at these games were incapacitated. And you can't see it, but they took the 1920 games. They actually had people climbing and were up in the trees, especially a lot of teenage boys that then and now don't know any better than to risk life and limb in trees to watch the game once it sold out or to save some money. So that's kind of my history of the Little World Series in brief. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the series specifically, the players who participated in it, or kind of baseball in that era, or Attleboro in that era, and I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability.
I've got a picture.